So, today is the 5th of December, and on this day in 1933, the 21st Amendment was ratified, effectively ending a good number of years of prohibition that had started with the 18th Amendment in 1919. Now, I think that's a pretty worthwhile thing to celebrate. America really is the best country in the world for cocktails, or at least it certainly has been in its history, and prohibition may have helped that to some degree as well. So you may be saying to yourself, why are you putting on all this ridiculous gear? I've got my Bolivian fedora there, got my double-breasted suit that was bought for me by my mum for my sister's wedding about 30 odd years ago. Oh my gosh, is it really that long? Barely fit into it anymore, of course. It's been a few years, and I might have had a few tapas since then. But I'm dressing in that sort of I try to want to go for that 1930s look. And I've got to be honest, I don't really know a whole load about prohibition, and really a lot of my knowledge was gained from a film I watched when I was 10 in 1976. The movie was released called Bugsy Malone, directed by Alan Parker. It was starring Scott Baio and Jodie Foster and a bunch of others. They were all kids and they played gangsters. So Fat Sam would have dressed a bit like this, Fat Sam's Grand Slam Speakeasy. And it was a sort of gang warfare. I barely knew who Al Capone was at 10, probably not so much. But this was sort of recreating that as a musical. It was hugely entertaining, but they didn't have guns. Well, they did have guns. They didn't shoot bullets at each other. They were splurge guns, and they fired custard pies at each other. And I'm not normally one for musicals, but I thoroughly enjoyed that film, and I heartily recommend it. I showed it to my kid a while ago, and he really enjoyed it too. So I do recommend that. Anyway, so what I wanted to do was to recreate a cocktail from the era, and that's why today we're going to make the Ampersand Cocktail. It appeared in the Waldorf Astoria old bar book, I think it's called, in 1934. Its appearance in that makes me think it must have been around a little bit longer, but it's clearly then the recipe is a post-prohibition one, admittedly a year later, but still, that seems like a really appropriate cocktail to be making. Now, the Ampersand, where does it get its name from? I think I read on Difford's guide that it probably came from the sweet vermouth that would have been used, martini and rossi, which I do not have that. I have Noilly Prat. I'm sorry, I've got French sweet vermouth instead of the Italian, and Italian is shorthand for the sweet red vermouth. But nonetheless, I think this will work. And then the other ingredient, actually this was the basis of me wanting to make this cocktail, is this drink here. It's called Ransom Old Tom Gin. Old Tom Gin was a style of gin that was really popular in the 19th centuries and a little bit 19th century and later. And it's sort of fallen out of favour, although this has been recreated, in part with the collaboration of the sort of the godfather, if you will, of mixology. He's a historian and knows so much. David Wondrich collaborated to make this as authentically as possible. So we are going to make the Ampersand using this Old Tom Gin. I will say I tried it beforehand with not Old Tom Gin, just regular gin, and it was very delicious even with not using this. But this adds a different sort of degree. It's kind of maybe a bit more viscous, the gin, and maybe a tad sweeter. So it is very different, and it adds quite a lot, I think. This is a tasty cocktail. But look at this. It's even got a little, I don't know if you can say, a little glass stopper on there. It was very fancy, very 1930s post-prohibition to me. It could be the Great Gatsby here, but nope, I think I'm more like Fat Sam. There we go. 1 ounce of the Old Tom Gin. Then we need some cognac. We are going to use Courvoisier VSOP, delicious stuff, and it helps make this such a full drink. This sort of wet, orangey, boozy, martini-ish, but not with the brandy. That's a really terrific drink. We need another ounce of that. So mostly equal parts drink. We're then going to get our sweet vermouth and put another ounce of that. So 1 ounce of each of the main ingredients, like so. And then finally, we need one other ingredient, is a dry Curaçao. You could use, to be honest, I'm using this one from Washington, but you could probably use kind of any orangey liqueur you happen to have in the house. I think that would work just as well, because you want that sort of hint of orange, just a little more than a hint really, because we've got some orange bitters. And we need 1/6 of an ounce, or if you're in mils, it's probably 5 mils, but you could also get away with using a bar spoon, I think, of this stuff. That would be, I believe in the original recipe, it was maybe a couple of dashes or something, which I know we've had this conversation, well, I've a bit one-way conversation, admittedly, earlier, but about 5 mils, about a spoon's worth or a sixth of an ounce if you're wanting to go with that measurement. Final ingredient is a dash of orange bitters, like so. Then we just got to give this a good stir, make it nice and chilled. And I will say, when I first made this drink, I'm going to pour this into a cocktail glass in a moment. But what I did instead was I used one of those, those big ice cubes and put it into a rocks glass and poured the drink over that instead. And so it works that way, I think, much better as a late night sipper because, obviously when you're just in a cocktail glass, it gets warm a little fast. And delicious though this is, they're very nice when they're chilled. So you could consider doing that. It's just as delicious that way. But this way is also delicious. All right, there we go. I think that is, my hand's going to drop off with cold here. So that's probably a sign that this is now ready. We'll pour that into our chilled cocktail glass. I'm using my sort of Art Deco-ish sort of glass. I'm saying sort of quite a lot, but Art Deco feeling that's of the era. This only takes one garnish, and that is a twist of orange. I've said before, I like to do a nice thick twist, so that's why I use a knife instead of a peeler often. It doesn't always look that delicate and nice on the glass, but you wind up being able to get more of the orange oil in the drink, which really does add to the complexity and the taste of the whole thing. Now, this is a hard drink to keep the peel on, but let's see how we go. All right, let's see what we've got. Oh yes, here's cheers to the end of Prohibition.